Well, hey everybody, I'm Nathaniel Dodson from TouchVid.com. Welcome right into this Photoshop tutorial where today we're going to take a look at retouching this dramatic portrait. Check it out. That's a quick before and after of what we're going to do here. If you enjoyed the tutorial, make sure you subscribe to the channel, or don't subscribe to the channel. You really don't have to, but I'd appreciate it if you did. Let's jump into this video and get this thing started. Well, so here we are. We're not quite in Photoshop yet, and I've got this raw file. It is a .dng file, image 104 from this particular shoot. I want to open it in Photoshop and begin the editing process. So here I'm just in the Mac OS Finder in Windows, wherever you're opening from. Just double-click. You can right-click on it, choose to open it in Photoshop, whatever you like. What's going to happen here is it's going to open it in the Camera Raw editor first. Now, we could go through and do a whole lot with this portrait just in the Camera Raw editor, but for the sake of just sticking with Photoshop purely, we're going to open this in Photoshop. Now, I am going to open it as a smart object, so I'm going to hold down Shift and see how my open object converts to open object instead of open image. That's what we want, open an object. It's going to automatically be a smart object. That's what that little icon is. Great. I can just name this base because this is our base layer. And what I'll do is I will drag this up because I don't need my adjustments layer to be, or my adjustments panel to be quite so big. First thing we'll do is we will go into liquify and just change a couple things. This is sort of the biggest pixel pushing thing. We're applying it to a smart object, so we can always go and undo it if we like. So I'm going filter liquify. What I'm going to do here in liquify when the panel does open, here we are. I like to work with, I can use the forward warp tool, I believe it's called. Yeah, there you go, forward warp tool. And I like my brush to be larger than the area that I'm pushing. So my thought is here, I will try to push his cheeks kind of inward just a little bit, and then maybe try to, push out some of his arms and shoulders, just define his muscles a little bit more. So I can use my square bracket keys to make my brush larger or smaller, and I have a size of 900 here, a density of about 69, pressure 24, we're looking good, and I can just push in a very little bit. And what I want to take care is that I don't warp the trees and stuff to the outside. I want to make sure I don't do that. That would be bad. And then I'll just push his shoulders out a little bit, make him appear just slightly more buff than he is in the flesh. And then we'll push out the triceps here, maybe even the buys a little bit, just something kind of like that. That looks good. I can come down here and choose the bloat tool right here. And I can, again, use my square bracket keys to make this a little smaller. And just touch each of the eyes, make his eyes just a little bit larger, maybe even his mouth just a tiny bit larger. Not too much larger, though. And we can just do a quick before and after preview. And you can see we're not changing him a huge amount, but that's kind of what's perfect when it comes to liquify. You don't want to see a huge change. Next up, the whole image is underexposed a little bit. So we'll come over here to our adjustments panel, add a curves adjustment, and simply set the curves adjustment blend mode to screen. You can see it's going to just flood in some light. Let us really see what we're working on here. This obviously would be probably an exposure slider adjustment in the Camera Raw editor, but we're doing everything here in Photoshop, not in the Camera Raw editor, so we're going to roll with a screen to curves layer to begin with. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to add a new layer, and it's probably really a better idea to do this underneath the curves adjustment here, because we're going to begin healing up and cleaning up this image. Look at all that noise down in there. This was shot with, I think, a 5D Mark II a number of years ago. So the noise in low light is not necessarily the greatest, but we're going to clean up and get rid of some of the spots on his face and do some cleanup work there. So I'm going to grab the healing brush tool over here, not the spot healing brush, but the regular healing brush. I am going to set the mode to normal, and I'm sampling from current and below, so I'll only be sampling off of the base layer. And then diffusion, I'll probably set it to about 4. It's going to blend a little bit more than 1 would. Then I hold down my Alt or Option key and simply sample to begin sampling kind of clean areas of the skin and covering up any of these blemishes or freckles or anything here that I see that I don't want in the photo. So there's kind of this scar here, we'll get rid of that, and so on and so forth. Okay, and once the face is done, you can run over the clothing really quickly as well and just clean up anything there that you think needs to be cleaned up. There's an incredible amount of noise and color noise here in this dark shirt. But I can, go ahead and brush away some of that stuff. And you can spend as much or as little time cleaning up blemishes here in the image. I'm going to move up above my curves layer, and I can call this layer just brighten just to keep it and differentiate it from what we're about to do. I'm going to add 2 curves adjustment layers. The top one I'm going to set to color dodge. You're going to see it's going to blow out my highlights. The second one I'm going to set to color burn. Then I'm going to select each of the layer masks, and here in the properties panel for the layer mask, I'm going to hit the invert button. It's going to fill the layer mask with black, therefore hiding everything on that layer, which would be all that darkening and brightening stuff. I'm going to zoom back into his face. I'm going to hit the letter B to grab my brush tool, and I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to size my brush tool way down here, and I need it to go even smaller. So again, the square bracket keys, right-click. We want to make sure hardness is set to 0. That's great. And what we're going to look to do is darken up kind of some shadowy areas around his eye. Now, at 100% opacity, you can see it's way too strong. So here we can change the opacity of the brush. Let's set it down to, like, I don't know, somewhere around 10, maybe 13. Let's see what this looks like. That's pretty cool. We can add those shadows, and I'll come around here, the edge of the colored portion of his eye, darken that up, and darken up the very pupil of the eye as well. Maybe make my brush a little larger, and just darken up the edges of the eyeball itself, make them appear to pop out of his head a little more. You need to be careful. You don't want to go too crazy with that painting on the edges of the eyeball effect too much, because you can start to make your subject look a little alien, and that's not a good look. So I'll just touch that, and then I'll zoom out and see what we've got. There we go. We're adding some nice shape and dimension to the eyes. That's the shadowy stuff. We'll come to the color dodge layer. So it's color dodge. And here we'll go with the brush tool again. I'm going to use my angle, or not my angle brackets, my square brackets, and I'm going to size my brush down, and then I'm just going to begin painting here, white to the eyes, again to add shape, and then fill in brightness here into the colored portion of the eye. Make sure we blow out the highlight. Make the highlight really nice and bright. It's going to make his eyes sparkle. There we go, something like that. That looks good. We can zoom out a little bit, and we can see there his eyes are. If we go before, there it is before, and there it is after. Now, of course, the beauty of adjustment layers is you can make it as extreme or not as you like. You can just reduce opacity and tone the effect down a little bit and really get the exact eye retouch that you like. One other thing I'll do, add a vibrance layer, reduce vibrance about 50 or so %. Again, select the layer mask, and we can just Command or Control I to invert the layer mask. I'm going to zoom back into the face, and I'm going to grab the brush tool, and this time I'm going to set the opacity of the brush tool to like 50-ish %, and I'm just going to paint over the whites of the eyes. And so we're using a 50% brush on a layer, a vibrance layer that's reducing vibrance by negative 50%. And it's just going to help just get rid of some of the wayward color in the eyes. It's not going to make them totally gray. It's going to get rid of some of the wayward color in the eyes and just generally make your subject look a little more healthy. And the same thing here, we'll paint over the teeth just to whiten them a little bit. You don't want to make them solid white. You just want to kind of brighten them up a little bit. And this is a nice natural way to do that. So next up, we will add a new layer, so a new clean layer here. And we're going to name this layer Dodge/Burn. And then we're going to come over here and go Edit. And we're going to choose Fill. And we're going to choose to fill this with a 50% gray. So now I'll hit OK. And I might zoom out just a little bit here. And we're going to set this to a blend mode of overlay. This is a nice high contrast overlay, but it knocks away anything that's exactly 50% gray, which is the entirety of our layer. Then we will grab our dodge tool, and I'm dodging with the range set to midtones and an exposure of 20%. Once again, use your square bracket keys to make your brush larger or smaller, and we'll just paint a highlight here over his chest, there over his arms, across his forearm, something just like that. That looks great. I can come through the wrinkles here. I can go through and just brighten up his knees, something like that. You can come along here, any of the highlights on his hand. You can go ahead and brighten those suckers right up. That's great. And then we'll go ahead and we will brighten the highlight here on the side of his head, just like that, to make that a little bit more extreme. The highlight there on his chin, I can zoom in. Usually it's a good idea to zoom in when you're dodging and burning, especially stuff like this. I can go ahead and just add a little bit more shine to his lips. We want to be careful not to add too much. We don't want him to look like a, L'Oreal beauty model or anything like that. That would not be the look that we're going for. I'll add a little bit more here to this cheek. And then I'm going to start with a really big brush up here on the forehead. I'll click once, and then I'll make the brush a little smaller and click again, maybe again and click again. And then I can hold down Alt-Option at this point. Maybe I'll make my brush a little smaller. Hold down Alt-Option. It's automatically going to switch to the burn tool. I can darken up the eyebrows like that. I can go ahead and darken around the edges of the hair just to really add some more shape and dimension into his hair. I can go ahead and make my brush a bit bigger. Hold down Alt-Option. I can paint down that side of his nose, underneath his lip there, and then underneath his chin, something like that. That's pretty cool. I can zoom out and see what I've got so far. I dig it. And then holding down Alt-Option again. And by the way, Alt-Option, it just basically flips the use of the tool. So right now we got the dodge tool. When we hold down Alt-Option, it temporarily switches it to the burn tool. We could just go right to the burn tool and paint with the burn tool like so and get the same exact results. I'll come along here. Whoop. Just undo it if you make a stroke that goes in a place you don't want it to go. And we'll add a little bit more shadow where his arm is touching his knee, something like that. We can come in here and add a little bit more shadow there underneath his legs. Whoop, I'm going to undo that. And then right down the middle of his hands like so. So if we shut this off, there's what we have. When we turn dodge and burn on, there's what we have. What I'm going to try doing is duplicating this, Command or Control J, and that looks ridiculous, right? But I'll select it and go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'll blur this. Yeah, you know what? Let's go 75 pixels. And what we'll do is reduce the opacity of this blurred layer to about 35 or so, and then we'll reduce the opacity of the underlying layer to like 50, something like that. So now if we shut it off versus turn it on, we get a much more natural look that blends with the image. It just blends with it a little bit better. All right, so let's begin working on our toning now that we've kind of done the dodging and burning and cleaned up the eyes and done like the pixel pushing retouching. Let's begin messing with contrast, tone, color, that kind of stuff. Let's add a curves adjustment layer here. And what I want to do, I want to boost my black point up, maybe something kind of like that. And then what I'll do is I will pull down to right about there, just darken up some of the shadows a little bit more. And then I'll come out here and I'll probably pull my highlights back, and then I'm going to pull my absolute white point down somewhere right around there. So if I real quick shut this off versus turn it on, you can see the difference we're making. We're kind of flattening out some of these middle and darker tones a little bit, helping make them a little bit more ready to take the effect that we're about to give it. All right, so now from the color channels drop down, we'll go to the red color channel, and I'm going to pull a little bit of cyan into the shadowy areas. Cyan's the opposite of red, so if I push up, we're going to get a lot of red. If I pull down, we'll get a lot of cyan. And then I'm going to add a second point up here. I'm going to pull down on that a little bit further, and I'm just going to add a little bit of cyan to the sort of kind of the midtones, heading into the highlights. Something a little bit like that I think works. Next, we'll go to the green channel, and I'm just going to pull down on this a little bit, just add a little magenta overall. You want this to be subtle because you go too much and it looks really bad. You go too much in the green, that also looks bad. So you want to go nice and subtle, just with a nice little kiss of magenta there. It almost should look like you've done nothing, but you definitely have done something. Then we'll go down to the blue channel here. And the first thing we'll do is we'll boost the blues in the shadows, something like, whoa, something like that. And then the opposite of blue is yellow, so I'm going to pull back through here and get some yellow into my lower mid-tones. And then I'll probably pull the highest point up here and just add yellow up to the brightest parts of the image. So if I shut this off versus turn it on, you can see the effect we're getting, right? We're just kind of muting the image, changing the colors of it a little bit. It looks pretty good. Next, what we'll do is we'll use a color lookup table adjustment layer right here. And I'm going to go with a 3D LUT file, and we're going to use one of their presets. We're going to go with the crisp warm look. You can see it's very heavily contrasted. It's got a lot of color, things like that. That's not a bad thing because this is an adjustment layer. We can reduce the opacity, knock that thing down to, I don't know, 40, 50%, something like that. And you can see there's before and after. And now I'm looking at his shirt. It looks a little bit too blue for my taste. I want to desaturate some of that blue. So I'm going to add a hue saturation adjustment layer. I'm going to grab the little finger scrubby tool. And all I need to do is scrub backward while hovering over his shirt. And Photoshop's going to do its best to target just those ranges of blues and desaturate them as much as we like. So I think I'll take this back to about -60, something like that. If I go before and after, you can see the difference. All right, so I like what we've got so far. I am going to merge all of this to a new layer, Command-Shift-Option-E, that would be Control-Shift-Alt-E on the PC, and I'm going to convert this layer by right-clicking on it, convert it to a smart object, and I will name this layer Sharpening. And what we'll do is duplicate this layer twice, Command or Control-J, Command or Control-J. I'm going to hide those two top layers. I'm going to select Sharpening right here. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to double-click on my Quick Mask Mode button right over here, right? It's right beneath your color picker. I'm going to double click on that. I'm going to choose and make sure that selected areas is what the color is going to indicate. The color of your mask can be anything. I'm just going with a green here because, yeah, why not? Green's cool. Then I'm going to make sure I have my brush tool, and I'm going to use my square bracket keys to make sure it's big enough. I'm going with a very soft edge brush. You can see if I right click, my hardness is at 0. That's great. And I'm painting with black. I'm just going to go ahead and paint over him. Now, you can see it's semi see-through. Our opacity is only 48%. Let's try cranking the opacity up to 100%. Make sure that we're getting a full-on selection here, something like that. And I can go in and just paint over his skin, just roughly. Doesn't really matter if the selection isn't perfect because we're gonna even soften it more here in just a moment. Now hit the letter Q. It's going to load that as a selection. Then we'll go Select, Modify, Feather, and we'll probably feather this, I don't know, 100 pixels, something like that. And then what I'll do here is go Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and here we're interested in just the sharpening. So I'm going to go to the Sharpening tab here, and I'm going to zoom in on his face. We're going to make sure we're at least 100%. 100 is always a good place to be. There we go. And I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key and begin dragging the amount slider up until I get a nice crisp image. I'll crank up the radius as well just a little bit. I'll probably reduce detail a little bit. I tend to find that gets rid of some of the smaller artifacting. And then also, all while holding down Alt or Option, drag the masking slider until it looks like the sharpening is just targeting mainly his face, and we're getting rid of it from a lot of these darker areas where all it's going to sharpen up is noise. Now I'm going to hit OK. It looks like we've been sharpening everything, but we haven't. All we did was sharpen the face. In fact, if we open up, that camera raw adjustment is attached to a smart object, and you can see it used our selection as a mask. Great. Let's go to the next layer of sharpening here. I'm going to once again hit the letter Q, grab my brush tool, and now I'm going to paint over his hands and the shirt here. So again, this can be rough because we're going to feather this. We're going to smooth out the edges a little bit more in just a moment. So it can be as rough as you like. Well, not as rough as you like, but it can be fairly rough. And then once more, hit the letter Q, and then we're going to go Select, Modify, Feather. We'll feather it by 100 pixels. That's great. And then we'll go Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And here with clothing, I'm once more going to zoom in on it. We're going to go back to the Sharpening tab. I want to first and foremost increase the radius a lot, and then I'll go ahead and crank up the sharpness a bit. And then maybe I'll even crank up the masking, something like that. That looks good, and I'll hit OK. Great. So there now we have the shirt sharpened. And the premise here is just the level of sharpening the face needs will be different than the shirt, and that'll be different than what the jeans need. So here, for another level of sharpening, once more filter, camera raw filter. And this one, we'll mask this one after the fact. We can go over here to our sharpening, and I'm going to zoom in down here on the pants. And here we'll hold down Alt or Option, crank up amount. For the radius, I think I might leave the radius down kind of low, and then I'll just turn up masking until it looks like we're basically isolating the sharpening. They're pretty much just the pant legs. It kind of disseminates out throughout the image as well. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to open this up. I'm going to select the layer mask associated with the Smart Filter, Command or Control-I to fill it with black and hide that sharpening. Then we will grab our brush tool, and now we'll just simply paint with white over the areas we want to be sharpened like we just specified using the Camera Raw editor. All right, now one other thing I want to do now that we've kind of explored with the quick masking, I'm going to try to collapse my smart object there. I'm going to hit the letter Q, enter into quick mask mode once more. I'm going to zoom out. I want to make the area behind the trees here a little bit brighter. So I'm just going to paint over that, maybe around him a little bit, paint over the trees, something just like so. Now I'm going to hit the letter Q, and we want to apply a huge feather to this. Select Modify Feather. We'll go something like 450 pixels. Hit OK. And then we'll add a levels adjustment layer, that guy right there, levels adjustment layer, and we'll open up the highlights a little bit more and just boost them. So you can see there's before, there's after. That's great. And I might have toned them back a little bit too much, so let's just boost them a little bit more. Turn it on. You can see it's just going to really brighten things up for us. Maybe we can boost the blacks just to make sure the trees aren't getting faded. There we go, something like that looks nice. Now I'm going to hit the letter Q again, and this time we're going to paint in the foreground. So I want to make all this stuff darker up here. Right, we want to just darken and kind of frame the image here. So now I'm going to hit the letter Q. Once more, we'll go Select, Modify, Feather. We'll feather this 450 pixels as well. Add a levels adjustment layer. And this one, I'm going to boost the darkness. So I want to just open up those shadows. I want to be careful because shadows can kind of go crazy on you really fast. And you can just see a quick before and after just like that. And of course, the nice thing about this, because they're adjustment layers, we can reduce the opacity of either one of these and just make sure we're getting the balance that we want. And then finally, I'm going to merge all to a new layer, Command-Shift-Option-E, Control-Shift-Alt-E. I'm going to convert this to a smart object. We will maybe jump over to Camera Raw Editor and add just a little bit of toning to this. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here, and I'm going to call this, I don't know, Final-Tones or something, and we're going to hit Command-Shift or Control-Shift and the letter A to open the smart object in the Camera Raw Editor. And I'm going to double-click on the zoom tool, and it's going to zoom me to 100%. Hold down the spacebar key, and just pull my image so I can see his face. All right, so first thing we'll do, we're going to pump the clarity up to about 20-ish. I'm there at 16. Maybe I should bump it a little bit further. 21. Then we'll come over to the Effects tab. We'll also bump dehaze up about 15, 20, something right around there. Then I'm going to come over here to my HSL slider. In the saturation, I'm going to desaturate blues quite a bit. That's going to help control some of that color in his shirt, but I want to make sure I'm not destroying his jeans. They still look pretty decent, okay? And lastly, I think we'll go to the tone curve. I'm working on the point curve, not the parametric curve, the point curve. And I'm going to select the black point down here, and I'm going to adjust its output point to like, I don't know, 2 or 3. Maybe I'll go 3. Then I can select the white point all the way up here. And this I'm going to pull down. We're going to set this to about 240. So this is just going to kind of flatten out some of those really bright highlights for us. And then I can go ahead and hit OK. And we can see what we got. So there's before we took it to Camera Raw, there's after we took it to Camera Raw. It's just got a little bit more bump to it. So now let's mess around with the crop tool and just see what our options are and the kind of things we can do with this finished image. I'm going to go image duplicate just to duplicate this over so we don't mess anything up here with our original image. In fact, I'm going to select all these layers and just delete them. So we're left with just our final tones. And you can see we're here in our cropped PSD, not the original one. And what I'll do here is I'll grab my crop tool. I'm going to set it to a ratio. And the ratio is going to be 2.39, by 1. It's just a super widescreen crop. Let me just try committing that and see what this looks like here. We'll see. Not too bad. Now, I didn't choose to delete the crop pixel, so I can click once more. I can resize this. I can maybe take it down a bit. We could take it and do something like that. Let's see what that looks like. Maybe it feels a little bit too tilted in one direction. So we'll click. Maybe we can shift him over a little bit. Maybe put him right in the exact center, something like that. That looks pretty cool. So my point is you can really do a lot here once you have your image retouched. And the crop tool is a fun little tool to play around with at the end. But yeah, that's how we take all of these different layers and create this one final image. I'll just hold down my Alt or Option key, click on the eyeball. There's the image we brought into Photoshop. Here is the image we have now. And that is a nice dramatic portrait retouch in Photoshop. So yeah, there you have it. That's the completed portrait. Of course, you can use these techniques, but use them in a way that you would prefer to use them. You don't have to do exactly everything I did. And the beauty of Photoshop, of course, there's 1,000 different ways to do everything, and you can really stop at any point along the way when you have your photo looking the way you want your photo to look. That's the beauty of this artwork and photography creation thing after all, isn't it? Make what you want to make, not what I want you to make. Guys, if you enjoyed the tutorial, again, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow me over on Instagram at tutvid. And if you're into Discord, check out our Discord server. There's a link for it down in the bio, but you can also go discord.me/tutvid. Also, if you really enjoyed the video, consider picking up a copy of my Photoshop course. It's right up there. It's all about how to retouch images in Photoshop. If you pick up a copy of it, it helps support the channel, my website, what we do here at tutvid.com. And for that, I do thank you so much. Guys, for messing around with some adjustment layers and masking, dodging and burning, camera raw, and everything in between, that's it. Get it? Got it? Good. Nathaniel Dodson, tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one. And before you go, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more great tutorials every day. Also, buy my course. It helps us do what we do, and this channel is supported by viewers just like you. You can also just click the thumbnail and watch another video from this channel. See you next time, guys.